Welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where Destiny brought together three friends to enhance each other's cinematic journey by watching three new movies in a series of themed rounds. There is no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode, as all film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy!
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast. My name is Tyler Beck. Joining our fellowship on our quest today, we have the Aragorn to my Gimli, the leader, the fearless leader of this podcast, the one and only Ben Lawhorn.
PO-TAY-TOES. My favorite part of this whole movie. Yeah. It's the one thing I remembered, and I rewound it like 4 times watching this. I love that scene so much.
Phenomenal. Another really good meme moment. Like, the Lord of the Rings movies just have the most memeable stuff in there. It's really fun. And like, I always forget which movie each meme came from. So every time it happens, I get the Leo meme moment.
Nice. You know?
Yeah. And of course, this fellowship is not complete, would not be complete, and could not be complete without our Legolas, the irreplaceable and immensely talented Matt Weiler.
Straightest arrow of them all. From the city of trees.
Indeed.
From the woodlands.
They make for good arrows.
It's true.
It's a balance. You don't want to run into like a Fangorn thing where you cut down too many trees to make your arrows, but they make for a good quiver. Well, you know, whether you're new here or if you're an established movie club member, thank you for your support. We're so happy to have you all here. And if you're not already following at 3 Films Pod on all your social media feeds, please consider doing so. And also check out our merch and Patreon support options over at 3filmspod.com. But before we go any further into this week's movie, please allow me to introduce you to our very special guest, Tom from Talking Pictures Trivia.
Hello. How you guys doing?
Welcome back.
Hello.
So, Tom.
Yeah, hello. Mm-hmm.
Welcome back. Long time.
I think I'm the Gimli in this group. Would that work? If we have an Aragorn and a Legolas, am I the axe-wielding tiny fellow?
You can certainly be Gimli. We talked about this. Oh, go ahead.
I think because of our tension, you would be the Gimli. If I'm the Legolas.
I right now, I don't like you, but I'm hoping by the end of the podcast, we'll have an unspoken friendship. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm confident you will.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny.
But I currently don't like you at all. Just know that.
If we're starting it out, right?
Likewise.
I've always identified with Gimli because, like, I don't look like Aragorn. I'm not tall and skinny like an elf. I'm not whatever. But I'm like, so I'm the most like dwarf-like as far as the Fellowship's concerned. But after talking about the first movie last week, it's like I'm more of a hobbit than anything. I just want to chill out in the Shire and smoke my what's that weed they smoke? Like
Old Toby.
Toby, yeah.
And drink my ale, hang out at the pub. Sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah, what's her name? Who's the woman that Sam marries at the end?
Gosh, I can't remember.
At the Prancing Pony? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't remember.
They set it up in that first movie. But.
Yeah, totally. Well, longtime movie club members may recognize Tom from some of our previous episodes, but just in case, Tom, why don't you take a moment and just kind of let people know who you are, where they can find you, all that sort of stuff?
I'm Tom. I work with Talking Pictures Trivia podcast. It's a podcast about movies, and we use a trivia format to dive into the films. And if you like this podcast, come over and subscribe to Talking Pictures Trivia podcast. We've had you guys on multiple episodes. We've did the Apu movies with Ben. Tyler, you were on. What were you on? Remember?
I came on for Clerks. I came on for Close Encounters.
Right? Yeah.
And something else a long time ago, but I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah, I did World of Apu and Shin Godzilla, and then I went with you for Clerks, which is super fun.
Yeah.
So those episodes are a lot of fun, so come on over and download them.
Yeah, totally. We've always had a blast coming on your show. I highly recommend, if you're listening to this show, you're going to like that one. It's fun to play along with, too. I know when I listen to episodes that I'm not on, I always feel like I do so well at the trivia. Then I come on and I don't do quite as well. But it's fun to play along and test your knowledge. And, you've talked about a lot of cool movies in the past. So, yeah, give them a listen and give them a follow if you're not already. And
Matt, have you gone on there, Matt?
I was almost on the From Up on Poppy Hill episode.
Okay. So if you guys can calm your tension on this episode, then maybe we can
that
work
was
out you
it.
getting
Honestly,
on there.
that was it.
That's the whole,
I asked KJ if Tom was going to be there. He said, yeah. I said, I don't know.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. We got some stuff to work out. So
it takes something a little more gravitas than a trivia show to get an elf and a dwarf to play nicely together.
It's a big thing.
We will slay many an orc together and resolve this long-standing conflict.
We'll make this work.
I hope so.
Well, as I mentioned before, this marks the third time that Tom has joined us on our show. You came on to talk about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. We sort of did an appearance for an appearance swap, as well as to help navigate our quest, navigating the world of Apu and the other two movies in that trilogy as well. You can find those episodes in our episodes feeds back in episode 1. And speaking of trilogies, this episode marks the second installment of the second round of trilogies in our second season. And continuing with that theme, this is the second time we've held a trilogy round, because obviously here at Three Films Pod, we partake in second breakfast. That first trilogy round, as Tom can attest to, we packed all 3 movies into one episode. So the Apu trilogy, we did one episode covering all 3 movies. We did one episode covering Blade, so on and so forth. And we had regrets as we were doing that. That was a lot. That was a lot. So we've learned our lesson. And this time around, we're just going to give each movie its own episode. And without any further ado, we're going to dive right into this week's movie. I'm talking, of course, if you haven't guessed it by now, or if you can't read your podcast feed. But let's just assume you just listen to your podcasts as they come up into your ears. We're talking about the second film in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, released in 2002, starring everyone's favorite fellowship with a few new faces mixed in, and directed, of course, by Peter Jackson. That's right, this episode is all about my personal favorite installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers. And I want to jump right into some personal experience and first impressions. Normally we go to the guests first, but I'll be honest, I'm so excited to hear Ben's reaction to this because, again, it's one of my favorites, and I know you haven't seen it in a long time, and no pressure, but the fellowship depends upon your experience with this movie. So let me have it. I think you just watched it today, right?
Yeah, I finished it up today, and I think I may have been wrong about beforehand when I said that I saw all these in the theater, because I don't know if I've ever seen this before, other than scenes in college. Like I talked about some of my audio classes, the teacher would show the behind the scenes, and so I was familiar with a lot of it, but I think I would have anticipated the potatoes thing. I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. Anything that happened in this, I did not know what was coming. So did I see this in theaters? I know I saw the first one. So I think this may have just been my true first watch of the movie.
Awesome.
That's
and I loved it. I mean, I thought it was so good. There's just so much to talk about that I know we'll all get into, but it's the act 2 of this trilogy. It's kind of a lot of the action, and you get the cool stuff of, the elves showing up we'll fight with you, and the Ents, which are super rad, they're super cool, and just the story as a whole. I think I fell more in love with Sam in this movie. It's oh, okay, I see now why he's the most pure hobbit, best friend, best wingman ever. You know what I mean? I don't know that there's a better friend out there.
PO-TAY-TOES, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
So yeah, I don't know. I genuinely loved it. I thought it was great. I'm excited to see the third one. I'm excited to see how this all wraps up, because I feel at least with the people I know, this one is the favorite, which I get, and I can see why. That battle at Helm's Deep is insane, and as I talked about last week, I finally saw who was showing up to save people. I did not know who it was. I was oh, okay, cool, that's who it is. So that was super rad. I really enjoyed that quite a bit. It was cool to see Carl Urban. I was not ready for him.
No one's ever ready for Carl Urban.
Right? Yeah.
No one is ever ready for Carl Urban.
No one's ready for him.
You can't prepare.
Yeah, I was watching with my girlfriend. Wait, is that the Ragnarok guy? He's yeah, and my stuff. I was oh yeah, it's that dude. I love Carl Urban. Shout out Dread if you haven't seen that. But it was cool to see him. yeah, I don't know. I had a blast, and I'm like super excited to get into the last one. And I feel like this is the kind of movie that will make it into a regular rotation for me. Like, I don't know how I haven't really watched it before, but it was awesome. I mean, it was 4 hours, but it was awesome. I had a blast.
Oh, that's beautiful. That makes me so happy. There was a part of me that was afraid you would be like, I don't know, it just didn't quite live up to the first one and blah, 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 blah. Like, and, you know, to be honest, like, as I was watching it this time, and I've never really been forced to make these comparisons before. I've always been able to just enjoy them as I enjoy them. But now that we're like, you know, thinking about these things a little bit more critically and putting our opinions out there, I was like, I think maybe Fellowship of the Rings is like technically a better movie. I just enjoy this one so much more. So I was prepared to have that discussion with you. You're like, yeah, the first one's just so good. I don't, you know, its second one's great, but so I don't know. But
no need. You can sheath your sword.
Yes,
you can put that back away.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, the story of it, the action of it. There's so much going on. Like, I do think after I watch all three, the Fellowship still might be like, maybe I think it's just the Shire of it all. Like, I love it. You know, like the whole setup there. And because it's the other one that I've seen, that only one that I've seen. But this one was like, man, the battles and stuff like that. It was so rad. It was just amazing to take in just all the work that went into this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was going through the trivia page when you talk about the work that went into this movie. It's like insane, some of the stories that are behind this movie. But we don't need to get into that right now. Tom, like I said, we usually go to the guest first, but I skipped because I just had to hear Ben's reaction. So I
wanted to hear Ben's reaction too. Yeah, I have not met someone roughly my age, and we'll say roughly my age for my sake, that hasn't seen the this trilogy. So I'm very happy to hear it lived up to it. But my first response to it, I think I saw this in the theaters. I have a terrible history of my own past, but I've always loved this movie, and I think this is my favorite. I go back and forth between this and Return of the King. Yeah. Just because I think Return of the King deals with death in a really interesting way. But this movie, maybe it's the best. I think what it does so well is that it makes you realize the sacrifice that's being made for this world to continue. And you see that with the elves leaving. That's a big spotlight on this movie that's not in the other two. It's you see the elves leaving Rivendell and Lothlorien, and that seems to be necessary for the age of man to begin. And part of that stuff in the book, it's not really in the movie. There's this idea that the elves have rings, and if Sauron gets the ring, he control these beautiful places. But you know, whatever. The point is that these people have to go for the age of man to begin, and these are the best places in Middle Earth. I mean, Lothlorien is the most gorgeous place. You know, it has this kind of Garden of Eden feel. And yet, if you want to be free as a man, if you want to be one of these people who, you know, has kind of freedom and autonomy in this world, these beautiful places have to go. And so I think this movie, more than any of them, kind of makes clear that the sacrifice is this kind of beautiful thing, right? This amazing, wonderful thing. And that the age of man is going to be potentially a good thing, potentially a bad thing. But it's going to be their age. And there's this kind of great sacrifice that's happening as a consequence of that. And I think the other reason why I really love this too is especially with Theoden, the king of the Rohirrim. You see, I think with him, and you see this too a little bit with Return, but especially here, there's this idea of like, it doesn't matter if you're defeated, you still ride out and fight. And that's where Theoden's redemption is. The fact that at that end, he turns to Aragorn and Aragorn says, let's ride out together. And he says, the horn will blow one last time and we will ride out together. And there's this idea of no matter what your back is against, no matter how inevitable the loss is, still you fight and still you push on, right? You cannot be ironic. This is not a space for irony. This is a space for romance or tragedy. And you will embrace, you know, you will embrace the battle, and hopefully it will be a romance in the sense that like the good will continue on and the world will be saved or what have you. But maybe it will be tragic. Maybe men will fall, and one day men will fall, but it is not today. And I think that's what makes these movies, so much better than like the crap that comes out of Lucas Studios now, or Disney, or whoever the hell owns that disaster.
Shade.
So I just finished Obi-Wan, and so I'm a little angry, but but that's my first impression.
The divide between Legolas and Gimli on this podcast widens by the minute.
It continues to grow.
Are you Matt, are you a Disney person?
Okay. Yes. Short answer, yes.
Short answer.
No, I mean, I objectively, I understand. I know it's a business. I know what they're doing. I'm not fooled by any of that. But I'm so much of a Star Wars shill that I'll just take all the content I can get at this point. So it's like,
I hate you so much, man.
I can separate it too. I can separate it. If there's too much cream, you got to shave that crap off.
Yeah.
It's not drinkable.
Those elf eyes can see past all the bullshit. Tom, that's my favorite line in the movie, by the way. That's the one I think of.
Your elf eyes.
Legolas,
use your stupid elf eyes and see.
I love it so much.
Legolas, what do your elf eyes see? The Uruks turn northeast.
Tom, both of your points actually, I had similar thoughts watching this, because this is the first movie of the three, and it's a logical point for the story to do so, but it's the first time when we really get a sense of the stakes, right? Like at first it's all ethereal. I don't even know if that's the right word, but it's all what does it mean when it's just in your head? It's just a concept, like you hear like, oh, these
subjective
rings. Sure, it's just like you hear about the ring, you hear about how it's dangerous, but this is the
abstract.
first time.
I see. It's
abstract, yeah. And this is the first time where you get to meet some of the people of Middle Earth, like some of just the everyday folks that are living in Middle Earth, and you get to meet some of the different creatures that live in Middle Earth with the Ents, and you see how like this story really does affect, and you really get a sense of the scope with Frodo and Sam's journey through Middle Earth with Gollum. Like this really does. This issue really is everyone's issue, and it's just you really get a sense of how important this really is. It really, the first time it really hits you home, and for me, it's the first time I feel a real sense of dread in this story. Like in the Fellowship of the Ring, it's all about the adventure, and sure, the raids are scary and all that, but it just feels like a fun adventure with some friends. You know what I mean? Like there's a Balrog and all that stuff, and the Mines of Moria are scary, but like the whole Two Towers just has like a feeling of dread to me, and I think a lot of what you said leads to that. Like you're seeing the end of an age and the beginning of a new age. You're seeing sacrifices being made, and you're seeing all those things. And I think, I knew you would have a good perspective on this, and I was very excited to hear it, but not quite as I was excited to hear Ben's point of view.
Well, it's the introduction of the geopolitical. That's what you don't have in Fellowship. This is where we learn there's these tensions that are global. It's only Middle Earth or what have you, but it's the introduction of that.
Well, and we talked about in our Matrix Reloaded episode, which I know you haven't listened to yet, they introduce a lot of political elements and things like that in Matrix Reloaded. Like we see like a Senate meeting in Zion and stuff. And we've talked about how they did similar things in Star Wars, lamenting about Star Wars stories. But this movie does it really well. Like when you say we introduce the geopolitical, we see courtrooms, we see court being held in these halls. We get to see some of that stuff, but it doesn't drag the story down, or it still feels cool and interesting, which I think is something that's very difficult to do, because we've seen other people fail to do it well. I can't go too much farther without hearing from Legolas. He's a man of few words.
Thank you.
I suppose so.
I guess.
But no, Matt, I want to know. I know you like this movie. We know we've had chats privately, but I want to know your whole deal with it. All your thoughts.
Yeah, Ben kind of asked about our top 25 movies, and so I threw mine up on Letterboxd, and this one makes the cut into my top 25.
Dang.
But I was watching this, and a lot of the scenes that I was anticipating and excited about were actually in Return of the King. So
oh no. awesome.
After we've completed the trilogy, I'll have to reanalyze and see which ones actually belongs up there. But I mean, I love this movie. I loved it. I saw it at midnight as a young teenager. The Helm's Deep scene was just like awesome in a way that I'd never experienced before. Tom kind of commented on that a little bit. That last ride, with Theoden and Aragorn is just like so awesome. And you don't like at the moment, you're not even anticipating, the arrival of some backup. You're just there along with them, all for the battle, all for the glory. So I love that aspect of it. One of my favorite parts about the Two Towers, and really my favorite part about most stories, especially when it comes to like justifying like a sequel trilogy, is I love seeing the party get split up and seeing who's paired with who, what's the dynamic, what are they dealing with. And this one is just super interesting. And the way those paths re-intersect is super interesting to me as well. You have Frodo and Sam who are fighting over Gollum. And it's an interesting thing because you have Sam who's like the pure in heart who like wants to kill Gollum.
Yeah.
And then you have Frodo who's like being corrupt by the ring who actually wants to spare him. You have Merry and Pippin who are, abducted by orcs and then abducted by humans who also may possibly have just as big of a threat to the overall goal as the orcs were. But you get some depth with Faramir, and you get to understand his and Boromir's motivations a little bit more. Yeah, and then the whole Helm's Deep story arc. And so just seeing the way that the story splits up but all ties together, kind of Tom said, that the global perspective of things, and that it's now become moving parts in several different areas in order for this thing to conclude at some point. And we hope it's the romantic ending, but I did want to comment just on the trilogy overall. So I watched this movie, and it was the day that Comic-Con dropped the Rings of Power trailer, which I think looks awesome. Again, Tom, I know what Apple's doing or Amazon's doing. They're
cashing in, baby.
They're cashing in.
I don't mind cashing in. I just don't like Star Wars. That's okay. I'm all about cashing in. If you guys
hope to do so one day,
I'll take it. Yeah. One day I'll strike it rich.
But one of the distinct things I felt about like watching the trailer versus like watching this movie is the elegance that Peter Jackson was able to capture.
Yeah.
As he adapted the literature, on the big screen, which is something that, even though that series looks awesome and I can't wait, I'm excited to see it. Same. It's missing from that trailer, and it's probably going to be missing from that show.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be able to style things similarly as far as costuming and environment and all that. But man, the score and the performances that Peter Jackson was able to glean from these actors and from these scenes, it has like this I don't know how to describe it other than like an elegance to it. Even the action sequences, even the epic sequences, they have like this reverence, I don't know, to what it was. And I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I had the same experiences, I think all of you. I saw it in theaters right when it came out, and Helm's Deep continues to be one of my favorite experiences watching a movie. And I think the reason so is like a lot what you were saying, Matt, because we've seen other epic battles. Like at this point, at the first time I saw this movie, I'd seen Braveheart, I'd seen Saving Private Ryan, I'd seen whatever. I'd seen movies with epic battles, and those are great. Like Saving Private Ryan is insane. The opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan is out of control. But I think there's the craft behind making Helm's Deep, a scene that was wildly intense, super threatening, very scary, very ominous, but at the same time it was still accessible. Like there isn't a ton of crazy gore, which I don't love gore. I don't have a total problem with, like, especially in the context of like comparing it to, say, Saving Private Ryan, right? Like there's a context for the gore there. There's a level of realism they're trying to achieve. this movie is able to do that and give you all those same things without like making it inaccessible. Like this is an accessible movie for everyone, you know, to a certain point. I wouldn't show it a kid. Those Orokai are terrifying, but I didn't really think about it very much until I saw that you'd written this, Matt. Like, you're right. He has a very deft hand in the way that he shows everything. Like this you feel like you're in the fantasy with them, right? And I mean,
yeah,
I'm encouraged that at least the Rings of Power has the budget behind it to hopefully make it what Peter Jackson was able to craft. But you're right. This seems like a fairy tale. It seems like something. I appreciate that it's accessible to everyone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's the elegance that you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm. And I think the elegance that you're speaking to, Matt, and I think you're right about this. That it is elegant, but I think part of it is that it has a history. When you look at these characters and look at these scenes, they're clearly places that have a long story. And granted, this is all fake, right?
Yeah.
Made this.
It's real to me.
Yeah, but and that's what Tolkien does so well. Is Tolkien establishes a history for these people, and that's why people want to go to Middle Earth. I don't know how many people here have read or watched Dune. No one wants to go into the Dune world, right?
It's sure. Arrakis looks like a bummer.
Arrakis kind of sucks. You're really thirsty, and unless you walk like an idiot, a worm will eat you. It's not a good place. But I think people want to go to Middle Earth in part because there is, besides it's beautiful, right? But there is these histories and these cultures, and that's what I feel is missing from the trailer, at least from the Rings of Power. And that's my worry: is those things aren't going to, or that show isn't going to be respectful of depth. It might be very exciting. It might have very good characters, but and one example of this from The Two Towers is when Éomer sings for the death of the Rohirrim prince, and she's singing in Anglo-Saxon. If you know anything about that language, that's the Old English language, which is the language of the Rohirrim, right? And it's kind of our history as well as English speakers. We used to, or our descendants used to speak Anglo-Saxon and evolved into English. And you see that relationship still there. Tolkien brings it out, and Jackson and his linguistic experts respect that. And so I think that's what makes, to Matt's point about elegance, I think the elegance is a depth. It's, a well of stuff that exists in every moment.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like I got that a lot with the ends too, just like, oh, something about to happen here that hasn't happened in a super long time. So they do a really good job of just kind of like, like you said, just like setting up the history here. I really enjoyed the geopolitical thing too. I know we talked on it, but I don't want to like take time from Matt, but one thing I liked about it is I feel like we got different versions of how it affects people because, there's the core group who like knows what's coming. So they're going to go prepare for battle. Then there's the Theoden. I don't know what that area is called, but they see like the threat coming and it's like, oh shit, we got to get out of here, so that, like they can see the literal threat. And then there's the Ents who have like already been kind of wiped out. And then that's when they decided to like take actions. Like, because at first they're like, no, it doesn't really affect us. Like we're going to skip on this one. I'll give you guys out to the south and then we're going to head out. And then he sees like what happens, like, oh, okay, holy shit. All right, now we're going to get involved. It's already kind of affected us. So it was kind of a cool way to see how they all came together, I guess, for the cause, So I'm very excited for this third movie to kind of see how it all wraps up. But it was very interesting for me to see like what motivated the people to get involved, like what it took for them to like have this sacrifice. And I think you guys have all hit on that, but that was a really great aspect of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything about this movie, from the attention paid to linguistics and language, to the sets, to the design of it, the storytelling is all perfectly well crafted, and that craft bleeds over into the portrayal of each character. Because when I think of any character from Lord of the Rings, I immediately think about the characters from the movies, obviously because that's my main connection to the story, but because in my opinion, they're so perfectly cast. I don't have like a very long history or relationship with the books. I read them a very long time ago. I don't even frankly remember reading them, but I know that I did. And so I want to talk a little bit about the performances and the characters here. And I want to do so by introducing our Apollonia Award to this movie. We did it for the first movie. I don't know if we'll do it for the third, but basically the Apollonia Award is inspired by the character Apollonia from Purple Rain. We wanted to highlight characters outside of the protagonist that dominate a movie. So like when you think of Purple Rain, you think of Prince, to be sure, you think of Prince, but you also think of Apollonia. They're sort of peanut butter and jelly. They're sort of hand in hand. You can't really think, in my opinion, when I came up with this award, when I think of Purple Rain, I think of Prince and Apollonia. So it's a fun way to talk about supporting roles that we love and give them a little bit of shine. But since there's so many great characters here, and you could make an argument. I mean, I think Frodo's the main protagonist, but you could make arguments for other characters as well. We're going to open it up to everyone. Everyone's on the table. So who gets your Apollonia? Tom.
I'm going to give it to the head of the Uruk-hai, who says, "Meat's back on the menu, boys." Just because here we have, we got a good leader, and the guy plays him well. Clearly an athletic guy, so he's probably like a stuntman or something dressed up. He looks terrifying, so he looks great. And that's a great line reading, right?
Yeah. It's really so good.
Yeah, it was so good. I didn't look up the guy's name. Typically, I would. I don't want to know it. He's going to be the Uruk-hai in my mind. And I'm going to say somewhere out there, Middle-earth exists. And even though Sauron has been defeated, this one freaking Uruk-hai is still going about his business. I'm going to say he became a farmer. That's my story for him. So that's my award, is going to
raising his cattle. Yeah, I dig that. That's another really good meme moment from the movie.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you called that out.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
It was that for me too. Like when that happened, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's it. Like I knew it was from Lord of the Rings. I just didn't know when it was coming. So there were like so many of those times like, oh, okay, cool. That's what this is. Mine for this one, it's Andy Serkis as, Gollum and Smeagol. Like I think that performance, I guess I assumed we were going to see more of him in the first one. I thought that we saw more, but I feel like he does a lot of lifting in this and does such a great job. I mean, I don't know. This is all off IMDb trivia, but apparently he was just coming down for 3 weeks of voiceover work. But Peter Jackson liked what he was doing so much physically that's when they decided to do like the motion capture. And I'm like, man, that's pretty rad. You're doing such a good job that now we're going to like create this, technology or, utilize this technology. So yeah, I don't know. I liked it a lot. There's so much of the back and forth. There's that scene obviously where there's like literally, it starts out with a really cool camera pan, to go to the other sides, from the Gollum to the Smeagol, which is kind of rad. But then we just start doing hard cuts of the back and forth. And I don't know, I thought it was a really good performance. I thought he killed it. And yeah, for me, he's the Apollonia Award winner for this movie.
I mean, I shouldn't argue that. I'm going to in a minute.
Cool.
Because I have a different pick, mainly because we have to, but I think that's a solid pick. I mean, you can't think about Lord of the Rings without thinking about the Ring and the Precious and Gollum and Smeagol and all that stuff. But yeah, Matthew, who do you have for Apollonia here?
Just commenting on Ben's real quick. Look, this is to the listeners. If you have a Gollum impression, which many of us do, keep it up. Okay.
Yeah.
People are gonna try People are gonna try to silence you. You keep it up. It's funny every time.
I haven't broken mine out for a while, but I do have one. I think I lost it. I was actually like embarrassingly kind of like practicing it as I was watching. I was like, can I still do Gollum? I can't, and I will spare you. But I used to be a thing I did quite a bit, too much to my friend's chagrin. I remember there was a specific camping trip when I wouldn't let it go, and
people get annoyed. Don't stop.
The next one. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that.
I teach at a college, and this is 20 years old at this point. I don't think they know who Gollum is. So if you can do a Gollum impression to a very young person, they won't know what's going on, and it'll be super creepy. So it's a double win.
A win-win.
New Girl reference. I haven't done this in a while. There's an episode of New Girl where Zooey Deschanel's character keeps quoting lines from Urkel to young people across the hall, and they don't know it's from a TV show, and they think she's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Roll the clip, Ben.
Roll it.
Did I do that?
How did you just come up with that? Where'd you get that?
It just came to me.
Where did that funny?
I just thought of it.
Yeah. That's how she casseroles.
What?
So mine might be the same guy as Tom's. We'll pretend it's a different guy just so I don't ruin it by giving the actor's name, but it was Nathaniel Lees, who was in the Matrix trilogy. He's the other guy in the Senate meeting. I think like the main dude that's like counter Morpheus.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought like what caught his attention for me was or caught my attention for him was that he was like hell bent on bringing these hobbits alive to Saruman.
Yeah.
And we think of these orcs as just like these chaotic beings, but they will follow orders.
Yeah.
And to Tom's point, maybe this guy got away and is living a life as a farmer because he's not like the other orcs.
There are no rules in this house. I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom.
He lives a life of order. He knows what he's trying to get the job done. He's got bills to pay.
As long as someone gave him the right orders. It is. I actually remembered. I thought about this as I was watching it this time. When we see the Uruk-hai being like pulled from the earth, from the goo, and they immediately are like following orders and like letting people like grab their chins and like inspect their teeth and stuff. And I'm like, these beasts were just ripped from the ether, and like they're just gonna come out and immediately be okay. Like they can follow orders. They're born and bred to follow orders. It seems.
But Ugluk, which is the name of this orc, he's not gonna eat the hobbits. He's not gonna eat the boss's hobbits, but he will eat another orc.
Yeah. He's got lines and boundary.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to have, everyone's got a code, right?
I like it.
I have been going through it with this award personally. When I first watched this movie, I would have begrudgingly chosen Legolas. I had like I was amazingly jealous of Legolas. I wanted to be like Legolas so bad. I wanted to be like tall and
the elf
athletic.
eyes.
I wanted to have the elf eyes. I do have good eyesight. I have that going for me. But the way he grabs, I'll never forget how he grabs the horse and swings onto it during battle, slides down the stairs, shooting his bow. Like he does so many cool things, and I would have given this award to him upon first viewing. Over time, it shifted to Gimli, and then maybe I would give it to the two of them together, their relationship. As I was watching this movie, I felt like I was going to give it to Aragorn. I felt like I love Aragorn in all the movies, but in this viewing of this movie, I just thought he was just doing a lot. He was not carrying the movie, but he was my favorite thing about the movie. But then we get to Helm's Deep, and a very first for this podcast, I'm not going to give my Apollonia to a person, but I'm going to give it to a place or a concept. Okay. And I'm just going to give it to the Battle of Helm's Deep and Helm's Deep in general. I love the look of it. I love the lore of it. We talked about world building earlier, and you get a sense of how many times they've retreated to Helm's Deep and fought off how many thousands of enemies. So I just love it. And when I think of this movie, I think of Helm's Deep. And so in the spirit of the award, when you think of a movie, this is the person you think of. But in this case, it's a place, and it's Helm's Deep, and it's just my favorite thing. I don't know. It's so much so that I forget that other things happen after it starts. In my memory, it's always we start at Helm's Deep, and it's like a half an hour long, and then the movie ends. And every time it's not the case, and we go to Osgiliath, and we hang out with Treebeard, and rightfully so. Like we need a break. There's a lot happening at Helm's Deep, but it's so dominant in my memory that I just think the whole last half of the movie is Helm's Deep. And it's never the case. And I'm always a little bit surprised at how much non-Helm's Deep stuff happens towards the end. But yeah, it's the first. We make the rules. We break the rules. Helm's Deep is my Apollonia here.
I did appreciate you going through like 8 honorable mentions before you finally got to like, first I was going to do this person. And
then I just decided to break the rules.
I wanted you to know my thought process here. I wanted you to know it wasn't a decision I made lightly. I wanted to stick to the rules.
I appreciate that.
I respect it. After rubbing in your great eyesight, and after we already know about all your walls you have, and then all your honorable mentions, I love it.
Yeah, I also like the idea of all of these people waiting to see if they can get the award and hearing your thought process. And it's going to be me. It's going to be me. It's like, no, it's a big thing of stone.
First time ever. It's a location.
It to a big pile of stone.
All of the people I mentioned were at Helm's Deep and played crucial, pivotal roles in the battle.
I can't wait for the Oscars next year. They're doing Best Actors. Like, actually, we're just going to give it to San Francisco.
That's what we need, is that guy who's holding the Moonlight. Actually, Moonlight, you won. We're going to do this for Helm's Deep. That's what we need. Matt, will you whip that up or get the intern to do that?
Yeah.
Helm's Deep.
The intern Well, so since we're here and we're talking about the actors in the movie, we've just sung the praises mostly of actors. Some of us broke the rules a little bit. But I want to throw all that out the window, and I want to do like a miniature emergency recast. Not because we want to, but because we have to. Let's pretend that we are the showrunners of this new series coming out, and we have to introduce one of the characters from these movies in some sort of flash forward sequence. But this character that you are recasting is unavailable, so you have to recast them. Who would you which character would you choose, and who would you choose to recast them with? And our esteemed guest is going to go first. Unless he doesn't want to. You can tell me you don't want to. We've had guests do that.
I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that was the last one, right? Oh, the last one I listened to.
Yeah.
Kayla.
They don't like to go first very much.
I know I'm ready. So I had two. I'll start with Daniel Radcliffe as Peregrine Took.
Okay.
Perry is a little bit of the dumber one between Perry and Harry. And I think Daniel Radcliffe would be a good Hobbit. He's Hobbit-esque, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he could play any Hobbit, but I think a little wide-eyed Perry would be very good. My other one
That's
was
why I wore my Hufflepuff shirt today, was how much Radcliffe and Elijah Wood would get mixed up for each other.
And Radcliffe is doing this thing in his career, it seems, where he's just taking on the weirdest roles possible. So sure, throw him in, make him be 5 feet and play Pip. Because how tall is he normally?
He's small.
Daniel Radcliffe?
Is he? Yeah.
If you remember from this movie, Peregrine is 3'6", right?
That's right. He's the tall one.
Mm-hmm. That was a cool part.
Yeah, he's
I like that.
Yeah.
The other one I was thinking was, Jack Houston from the Houston line? He was in Boardwalk Empire, was his biggest role. He played the guy with half a face. And he is part of the Houston family, and he's a very good British actor, but I think he would be a good Wormtongue.
Nice.
He's got a little like skinny, creepy vibe, and plus you get the Houston family dynasty.
Yeah,
their gold will shine upon this television show we're hypothetically casting.
Yes.
So those are my two recasts.
Nice.
Okay,
I like that.
I like it. Matthew, who are you recasting here?
Oh man, I've got a couple of recasts as well. First, we got to go, and I didn't want to do this, but I felt inspired, and I'm recasting Gandalf, and I'm recasting him with former President of the United States, the late Grover Cleveland.
Let's do it.
And
you are right to do this, sir. Yes.
Tell me why.
I don't hate you as much anymore. It's mending a little
bonding.
bit.
I love
starting
it.
to bond. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, why would Grover Cleveland make a great Gandalf?
He actually wouldn't. Like Gandalf is very much like a what's his name? A Winston Churchill type. Like, we need to be aggressive and go out there and fix the problem. Grover Cleveland was very much more in the isolationist camp. He was very much like, no, you can colonize Hawaii. Hawaii is a place that needs to be independent. You just can't do this to the people. So
more of an Elrond.
Yeah. Grover Cleveland you would recast Elrond with Grover Cleveland.
I love this.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. So my real recast would be Éomer, and I would hate to replace Carl Urban. Love the guy. Looks great on horseback. But I would go with Diego Luna.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is a good one.
But part of that's because I know the new Rings of Power is sort of addressing this. I didn't really recognize this until, recent events started pointing this out everywhere. But this is a very white trilogy. It's a very everyone in Middle Earth is white
trilogy. Yeah.
And that was the world that it was written in. But bring in Diego and spice it up a little bit.
I like it.
I'm glad you made that point because it's something I wanted to talk about during the Apollonia. I thought it was funny as I was reading everyone's answers and thinking about doing the Apollonia. There's literally 2 women in this movie and neither of them were picked. Shouts to Liv Tyler and the woman whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, Miranda Otto, who plays Éowyn. I actually really did like Éowyn's character. I forgot how much of a badass she is and how much she really does want to join the fight. And I really love horrible cook, just the worst. She's a fighter, man. She's not a cook. But I really did love the way that she accepted her role. Like, it was begrudging, but she accepted and excelled at it. You know what I mean? Despite being probably could have been useful on the battlefield. They needed all the help they can get. But I really did like her character, and Liv Tyler is a literal goddess not only in this movie but in real life. So shouts to the 2 women in this movie. But
true.
I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny that Aragorn is soaking wet in the river when he has that dream.
Yeah.
Of
I see where you're going with this.
Of Liv Tyler.
3 films after dark, baby.
Hi, Steve.
I also love that everywhere Aragorn goes, the whatever woman is in the movie falls in love with him.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Who's to blame them? But yeah. I thought that was funny. Anyways,
Carl Urban's sitting there like, wait a second.
We can get back to our recaps. I just wanted to point that out. I just wanted to.
Do you know what the original Aragorn was in the books? He was another hobbit. It was Trotter the Hobbit, who was famous for wearing wooden shoes. Okay. And Tolkien wisely thought that doesn't work.
Let's switch this up a little bit.
Yeah, good call.
I like that.
Guy knows what he's doing, apparently.
My pick was, again, I think this being the first watch, I felt weird swapping out anybody at first.
Yeah.
So I was going to go with Treebeard. And I just, instinctively went with who I think is one of the, more, I don't know, well-known voiceover actors is James Earl Jones. So we talked about how much we love Star Wars on here, but it can be kind of cool. We got Mufasa, we got Vader, let's let him be Treebeard. I think that'd be kind of rad. And then I realized it's the same dude, John Rhys Davies, who also plays Gimli, who does the voice for Treebeard, which I didn't know. And it makes sense, I guess, with the way they look. So then, at the risk, I mean this in a very correct way, but it's I think it'd be cool if Peter Dinklage did both, because I liked him a lot as Eitri in the Infinity War, playing that, huge character and a much different voice and all that kind of stuff. I'm I think he could pull off both as well. So, and I mean, with Game of Thrones, we obviously kind of like him in that whatever kind of style. So yeah, I don't know, kind of a toss up between the two. If I'm going to do both, I'm going to swap out the actor. I would go with Dinklage. If I'm just doing Treebeard's voice, I'd like to put James Earl Jones there because I always like hearing him.
This is why I love having you on the pod for so many reasons, but I never thought even for a second of Dinklage, which after I just got on my soapbox about making sure that women were represented, to have, you know what I mean? We should probably have the dwarf character played by
a little
Peter Dinklage.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's probably the way we should go with this. So yeah, that's a phenomenal pick. And I'm not going to allow you to do James Earl Jones. You have to do Peter Dinklage.
Okay, fair enough. You make the rules.
I'm just kidding. No, so when I thought of this character, it was the scene when Matt talked about Aragorn in the river, and Arwen visits him in his dreams. I was watching her, and I thought, she's everyone's so perfectly cast, and she's such a perfect elf princess. I was who could you recast her with? Obviously, you have Anne Hathaway, who's a literal carbon copy of Liv Tyler. I thought I'm doing it again. I'm doing all my honorable mentions first. I thought Anya Taylor-Joy would be fun, but then as I was thinking about it, for whatever reason, it popped in my head. I really want to see Giancarlo Esposito play Saruman. I think he has a level of menace that he can portray after, seeing him play Gus in Breaking Bad that I think would make Saruman, because Saruman he seems like a threat, but he doesn't seem scary to me in the Two Towers. And I want to see him be scary. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see him be truly menacing. And I think, well, I know that my good personal friend Giancarlo can do that very well. And I don't know why. I just popped in my head. I was going to go with Arwen and Anya Taylor-Joy, but then I was like, nope, it's got to be Giancarlo, and I want to see him be an evil wizard. Any qualms? Any qualms from anyone?
Not for me.
All right.
I like Joy as Eowyn. I do like that casting, but I'll see your Giancarlo.
Yeah. That's why I had to sneak it in there. I was like, I got to at least shout it out because I was very proud of myself. But at the last minute, literally as I was typing out my answer, I was like, no, I want Giancarlo. So I don't know. So we've all professed that we love this movie. It's one, at least 3 or at least 2 of ours, 50% of this podcast right now is their favorite movie, right? Everyone else at least really liked it. But I want to know if you had to convince someone like Ben to see it for the very first time and you could show them one scene. You're in an elevator. We got to give an elevator pitch.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
You can show one scene from the movie or moment from the movie. What would you choose to entice them, Tom?
I would do the dream of Aragorn. So when Aragorn falls off the cliff, he has this dream of Eowyn, which then transitions into kind of Eowyn's history, where it's sort of a Middle Earth version of DMing. But he's thinking of Eowyn, and then you see Eowyn's history with her father, and then she's going to leave Rivendell. I think she's in Rivendell at that point. And then she turns around and comes back. And you have this kind of really dreamlike and kind of beautiful sequence. And I think sequences like these are what makes this movie so much more special than similar films, similar fantasy films or action films. It's a beautifully shot scene, and you see the sacrifice that she is going to make, and it's presented to her. And then you also see the elves leaving. And I think the kind of tragedy of her story, which really is a tragedy. I mean, if you, not to jump too much in the books, but if you read about her death in the books, if you go into the appendices, they talk about her death. She dies alone. She's buried, and her grave is forgotten. They don't even know where she is anymore. She and her grave are just forgotten. Yeah, it's devastating. Wow. It's absolutely devastating.
Wow.
And I honestly don't think the movie, even though it's not dramatizing that particular aspect of the book, I don't think it's steering away from that either.
Right.
I think, again, this captures that kind of loss. And it's also just sort of hallucinogenic and strange. And it gives you the complexity that I think this movie is giving to its audiences.
It's a cool scene to show in a movie like this that's marked with scenes like, meeting the Uruk-hai and the army, the march on Helm's Deep, all of that. Like, this movie's pretty dark, thematically, and there's lots of violence and there's lots of scary shit in here. So I like that scene for an elevator pitch because it could help remind a viewer that it's not all about scary orcs and battle scenes and running across Middle Earth. There's real love here. There's like real weight and some cool pathos and storytelling. So I think, I dig that scene. That's really cool. Very cool. Benjamin, what would you show someone as the one newest to the movie?
Yeah, I know, right? Mine is, I really enjoyed the scene. I think, we talked about everything that the mouse owns. I know Marvel gets a lot of shit sometimes for undercutting serious scenes with humor or whatever, kind of doing that. But there was moments in this movie where that happened, and I really enjoyed it, like as they're prepping for Helm's Deep, and it's like, the camera's panning across, and we just see like the top of Gimli's helmet. It's like, this is the best place you could pick, it's like, there's some funny stuff in there. And I really enjoyed when they're sneaking around the side, and he's like, throw me, which I think, and in the first movie, he's like, don't ever throw me, right? Like he was just so that was kind of cool to see that kind of callback. But before then, when he's just like, don't tell the elf, it's like, I got a really good kick out of that. Cause it's just like, I could just see like, he cannot know about this. Like, I'll do this cause we need to win, but don't tell anybody. And I just thought that was super funny. Like, I know it's a scene that's like, this culmination of like Helm's Deep, and we're kind of coming up to the end of it. So I don't necessarily want to ruin that, but I also kind of feel like I'm one of the only people in my age group who hasn't seen this, so I don't know who like it's be spoiling it for, but
yeah,
mainly that just specific scene. I think everything else would still have an impact and pay off in watching it, but just that little clip where they like sneak out that side door and get thrown over there, that's just like a basic fight scene that I don't think spoils too much and has a little humor in it, so I like that.
Yeah, it's like, again, it speaks to the overall craft of the movie, because you're right, like there you can make the criticism in a lot of movies, like you're leaning on humor undercutting the moment, but like in this movie, like they're so perfectly placed. Like you need these moments of levity, like that moment with Gimli and his helmet, like that comes around the same time that the Orkai are pounding their staffs into the ground, and we see what it sounds like from beneath, and like that's still terrifying to me. I still get scared every time I watch it. Like I feel true anxiety and dread, like, oh god damn, this is so
thinking about
scary.
being in the caves with the women and the children, like that would be fucking so intense. But yeah, we get a lot of Gimli, jokes there too. It's just like with Legolas, like, do you want me to lift you up or do you want me to get you a box? And like just and they just like were able to like laugh with each other. It's so I don't know. I really enjoyed all that.
There's also a human tendency in like serious moments just in our lives to find some levity. We're not like trying to crack jokes necessarily, but trying to make light of something that, is awful. Like really they're facing their doom. And I feel like this felt a little more honest than maybe the way Marvel does it, which I'm not complaining about Marvel, like, what it is. But it did feel different. It felt like welcome because it felt like I could see people facing battle, like potentially their death, maybe their last day alive, like trying to make the best of it.
Yep, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, the stakes are higher. Right? When you watch Captain America, I'm going to fight the other Iron guy. Wait, Captain America, is that Captain America 3 where they have to fight each other?
Civil War, but
Civil War. Thank you. Yeah. Captain America.
But it's the third one. You're right.
Yeah, it's that scene where they line up to fight one another. The comedy there doesn't undercut the severity of the moment, because you really get the impression no one is actually going to really lose their life here. I know the one of the characters, Rhodey, can't, he gets partially paralyzed or temporarily paralyzed or something, but there's really no sense of stake in that scene. And I think that's the comedy undercuts the undercutting that the comedy does. It relieves tension because the tension is really, really great. They're coming to eliminate these people, and by all accounts, these people should be eliminated. This orc army is large enough to do it. So I think that's why that works so much better than those Marvel films.
When you say the orc, not only is their army big enough to do it, but there's so many moments where, like, in pursuit of, eradicating these humans, they like injure each other and cast each other into their doom. Like, when they raise these ladders, like the orcs just go flying. When they do it, the battering ram, they're just pushing their own. By design, they create a shield and just like push, presumably killing all these orcs on their way to ram the wall. So it's just like, in the face of something like that, to be able to laugh at anything, and it's a very welcoming thing to be able to get a chuckle here and there.
For sure,
you're absolutely right, Matt. You haven't given us yours, right? You haven't given us your elevator.
I have not. Yeah.
Okay. Well, please do.
Mine would be, and we already talked about this scene, but I would love to show the sequence of Merry and Pippin at the orc camp at night. The infighting amongst the orcs, and then their eventual slaughter by the riders of was it Eomer? Yeah. I just thought that was crazy because like they you don't even know what to expect. Like, first they want to eat the hobbits, then they're infighting, and like just moments later they're slaughtered. And that's just that buildup is just like insane. And so I'd love to show it to someone and be like, yeah, Lord of the Rings. Check it out.
Lord of the Rings, baby. I like that because that's like, we get a pretty cool like Deus Ex Machina sort of thing. Like, all of a sudden, it's set up that the writers are out there, they're doing their thing, but it comes at just the right moment. This movie does this a few times where all hope seems to be lost, and then all of a sudden something comes in and saves the day, but it doesn't feel cheap because it was so well set up. Like Ben, you mentioned it earlier, like you didn't know that it was Gandalf that comes back to save the day, and Tom, you talked about it, like you sort of forget when they go out for their last ride, Aragorn and Theoden, like you almost forget that Gandalf said he'll be back, that Gandalf's coming. And so when those things happen, like the payoff is so good. And you're seen as a perfect example, without being too spoilery, of how well set up it is. Mm-hmm. So I just said that your pick is not spoilery. We all know that I love to pick non-spoilery scenes for my elevator pitches. But I want to show Saruman revealing his army to Wormtongue, because I would love to be able to show someone Helm's Deep, because I think if you showed everything up to when the orcs are pounding their spears and right up in Theoden says, "So it begins," if you cut there, like, I think anyone would want to know what happens next. But I don't want any of that spoiled for our hypothetical viewer, right? So I want to show them the first time that, Saruman reveals his army to Wormtongue, and, Wormtongue cries and all that stuff, because you get a sense of like how intimidating and threatening this army is, and how this is bad, right? So you would, I feel like you would want to know, like, how does this get resolved, and how do our heroes save the day? Because I think we all would assume that that's what happens, but I guess you never know. But
yeah,
that would be my pick.
That's a great pick. I wanted to highlight that, Tyler, your pick reminded me. I love that there's a scene where like Saruman's down in like that orc pit where they're fabricating these orcs, and he has like an argument with like a manager orc. I thought that dynamic was funny.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We can't.
Like walking the factory floor. Like, like that.
Yeah, I want to see what do the orcs do on their lunch break, right? Like,
it's Saruman, undercover boss. Like, so what do you guys do down here? Like, what's going on here? Like,
that's such a good bit. Wish that bit existed somewhere. Wow.
Oh, SNL did that with Kylo Ren.
Right.
SNL did undercover boss with Kylo Ren, and so I don't think you could repeat it.
Oh man,
well, I still want to see it. I don't, give me all the Lord of the Rings content you've got. We've talked at length about a lot of things, mostly Helm's Deep. I feel like it's just
Apollonia winner. Helm's Deep.
It looms so large in my heart and in my mind about this movie. And I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk about our favorite battle sequences in all of cinema history. So we are going to take ourselves over. We're going to point this fellowship towards Rushmore Mountain. We're going to fill out our best battle sequence, Rushmore Mountain.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
The idea here is we're each going to pick one to make up 4 total picks. We used to do 4 each, totaling 16, but we've changed the rules, and we're each going to give one. Tom. Actually, you know what? I'll just tip my hand. Helm's Deep is mine. We've talked about it enough. I can't make this list and not have Helm's Deep on it, so Helm's Deep gets my pick. Tom, what gets yours?
I'm going to go with Orson Welles' film Chimes at Midnight, which is, if anybody knows that, has anybody seen that movie?
I have not.
It is an excellent. You had me at Orson Welles.
Yeah, it's an excellent movie. It's Orson Welles' adaptation of Shakespeare's Henriade cycle. So that's Henry IV, 1, 2, Henry V, and a little bit of Richard II too. Though he's more focused on a character named Falstaff. And there's a battle in there between the person who will become Henry V and his opponent, a character named Hotspur. And you don't really see them, you just see the battle. And it's really more from Falstaff, this knight's perspective. And Falstaff, played by Orson Welles, is a very fat and very cowardly knight, and he's hiding out and trying, what have you. And this battle sequence is absolutely brutal. And horses are going back and forth. It's cut incredibly fast. And it ends with these knights in the ground in mud. And they're just coming out of the mud and like fighting each other. At this point, incredibly tired, and just and you see this sort of, it's a very heroic movie, and these plays are very heroic. This is Henry V is in this cycle, right? Where Henry V, the friends, countrymen, brothers, whatever, whatever that speech was, that he says. Right. But this battle it sort of shows the kind of damaging side of war, right? That even within this heroic framework, at the end, these people are reduced to kind of these mud creatures who are just sort of stabbing each other and slapping each other, completely covered in filth. It's an absolutely devastating and brilliant battle sequence in a really beautiful movie. And I would recommend anybody see Chimes at Midnight. It's a fantastic film.
I just added to my Letterboxd watch list. Here. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. That's crazy. Incredible. I know some of the Henry IV stuff and Henry V is also like a very loose inspiration for my own Private Idaho. So I'm just trying to figure out how these, like what the Venn diagram is on these two movies here. Like
there's
how does this cross over? I love it.
There's our drive-in.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, we didn't have time for the drive-in tonight. Adam's pissed, but at least we mentioned it, right?
Exactly. We had to bring it up. Yeah.
No, that's cool, man. I definitely, like I said, I added that instantly to my watch list, and I'll definitely check it out. It sounds really cool. I'm obviously a sucker for a good battle scene, so I really appreciate the recommend. And you described it beautifully. Matthew, where would you go here?
Oh man, mine's actually a recent movie that I saw. I don't know if anyone else has watched RRR on Netflix.
No, but I've been seeing so much about it. I'm going to go add that to my watch list also.
So
maybe we need to cover it.
It's a 3-hour movie, but it does have an intermission. It's Tollywood. Nice. So it's Indian cinema. It's got some of the most insane battle sequences I've ever seen.
Okay.
And if you take the energy from the Aragorn Theoden energy when they're like, let's do this last ride and spread it across a 3-hour movie. That's the energy of this movie. That's the vibe. But it's Tollywood, so you also have some song and dance in there.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I've seen so much about this on it's like trending on Twitter recently, and I'm just like, this seems like an experience that needs to be had.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't even want to describe one of the scenes just because, I mean, one, it'd be spoiler, but it'd be so unbelievable, and you also wouldn't believe me how awesome it is based off of how I'm describing it.
Okay.
You just better watch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's called RRR, 3 R's. Okay.
Nice.
It's now on my watch list. Gosh, it's hard. We can't even talk about that one because no one else has seen it, but I guess no one had seen Tom's either, so. Look at you. You two have more in common than you think.
It's coming together. It's coming together.
Yeah, I'm begrudgingly seeing you as a brother.
I like it.
I mean, I'll just say that RRR. I've been a critic of the modern day use of the shaky cam in action movies, just because of how lazy it feels compared to, a lot of other filmmakers who compose every single shot. And this is just so very well composed and choreographed that you're watching one shot and it's just bananas how much is happening on the screen. And yeah, like I said, just something you got to experience. I recommend it to everybody. If you're listening to this podcast, check out RRR. It might be your first, Indian cinema movie, and it's a great one to start off with.
Yeah,
sweet.
I dig it. Benjamin, Aragorn. What would you do here?
Here we are. I mean, I thought of a couple. One that we've covered on here was Paths of Glory, that suicide mission.
Oh yeah, that's a really good one.
I think it's a very cool shot, very cool battle. Obviously, like the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, that's just a classic. Omaha Beach scene and Dunkirk, all that stuff. But the one I went with was Portals from Endgame.
Yeah.
Just that, kind of final battle. There's just so much, like we talked on this movie with Helm's Deep about how everyone's like coming together and all that kind of stuff. And, I think the end game, they were like, it's a 23 movie battle. You know what I mean? It's like culminating all this kind of stuff together.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. So just one of the cooler scenes I remember experiencing in the theater. And I just felt like it needed to be on here. Everything from, Black Panther coming out of that first portal, the fight leading up to it, all that kind of stuff. So It's an awesome scene and just a huge payoff for that whole first phase or, first saga, whatever, for the MCU. So let's go with Endgame Portals.
Well, I love that pick. And I also want to say that there's no way you get that scene without Helm's Deep.
Yeah, totally.
The way that they built up the Gandalf arrival.
Yeah.
And then the way that Falcon comes in with the on your left sort of thing. It's like, oh man, that had to have been studied. Yeah.
Well, and like, I could sense a little bit of like, I don't want to say embarrassment or whatever while you were describing that. And I can also see your notes in the doc, like you didn't want to necessarily make this pick because there are a lot of great picks, but like that for at least the three of us. Tom, you seem to have some issues with the Marvel movies. I don't know if you have quite as much of a connection to this moment.
I actually think Endgame is not only a good movie, I think it's a beautiful movie.
Right.
So Endgame is I pick on Marvel. I enjoy about
rightfully so. Yeah. But it's like that moment
and Star Wars, yeah.
That moment was like a seminal moment in our shared history, right? Like that was a huge cultural moment for so many people, myself included, and probably a lot of our listeners. I think a lot of people, even like my girlfriend who doesn't really watch a lot of the same movies I do, and certainly doesn't watch any of the Marvel movies. She watched just that scene. It came across like her feed on some social media thing. And she watched just that scene and she was taken by it. Like she got emotional by that scene. So like, it's a phenomenal scene. I just, I know that you have, you're a confident person and you don't need me to justify your picks, but I could sense it in your voice that you were hesitant to make that pick. And I can see your notes here, but I think it's worthy of the choice. I mean, Saving Private Ryan's phenomenal and there's a lot of other picks you can make, but I think Endgame is absolutely a Rushmore pick.
Well, why were you hesitant then?
I don't know. I think it felt like a very to the point that we changed one of our Clubhouse questions because so many people were answering like, what was your favorite theater experience? Like Portals and Endgame. And it's amazing, So it's just like, I guess I sometimes just feel weird doing like the populist answer, it's like, oh, it's like, it's the biggest battle for the biggest franchise that's ever existed, paying off 23 movies, just like, oh wow, Ben, did you dig deep for that one? Like, you know what I mean? It's just like
you wanted to be more of a Grover Cleveland.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, man, how much time did you spend on that one? But it's like, if I'm honest with myself though, like that was like, I was crying in the theater and stuff. Like it just, I think for a lot of it meant a lot. So scene.
It's a lot of fun, especially in the theaters, but it's even rewatching it on Disney Plus, which I still have. Nice. despite Obi-Wan Kenobi.
The mouse gets your money.
That movie does. That movie does really have an impact, and I guess it is just this kind of build up from these past films or whatnot.
Yeah,
but I think the scene is very touching, also.
Totally, and the fact that they did it, like that could have easily not worked. Like the fact that they made it all work and put it together and made it effective is an achievement in and of itself. And like, I could see being hesitant because maybe you think, oh, it's a recency bias thing, because there are other objectively great battle scenes, but I don't know, man. I feel like it's earned. So rest assured, Benjamin, I'll always have your back there. So this is one of my favorite episodes to record, not only because of the movie, but the conversation is phenomenal. I do feel like we could go for at least the runtime of the extended editions here, talking about this movie.
Yeah.
But real quick, before we go, I know Tom has some things he wants to talk about. So, what are some of the things that you wanted to chat about before we get out of here, Tom?
If you want to, I mean, there's
of course,
so many things.
I would love to talk about this movie.
Yeah,
and I love your perspective on things. So.
Thank you. That's very kind. I would say some of this has been inspired by a few scholars I've been reading. So I'd recommend anybody read Michael D.C. Drought, who's the editor of the Tolkien Encyclopedia, and Tom Shipley. Tom Shipley is a great scholar of Tolkien as well. One thing I want to bring up, which I love, which I think is apparent in this movie, is something from Shipley's scholarship, which is about Gollum and what the ring does to people. And what's interesting, he mentions, is that kind of bifurcation of Gollum's voice, right? Gollum and Schmeagol kind of talking back and forth. It means there is no first person pronoun. There's no I, right? It's always the precious, and I'm the precious. And and then we're going to get the precious. And
we
the
need
way
it,
he
we needs it. He hates us.
But the way he refers to himself is never I. It's always precious, right? Which is the same word he uses for the ring. And so his addiction to the ring and to, whatever benefit the ring gives him, has made him lose any kind of sense of identity. Not only is he fractured into Sméagol and Gollum, he also no longer has a first person. It's just the ring. He is the ring. He only refers to himself with the same language he uses to refer to the ring, which is which is a great detail. And another detail I saw in rewatching this is the fact that, and you see this a little bit with Return of the King, not to ruin it for you, Ben, but the potential that Gollum has for redemption that he doesn't get. You'll see this in Return. Sam kind of screws it up. I mean, Sam is the guy who seems completely guiltless until he screws up Gollum's redemption a little bit, if you look for it in Return of the King. But here too, where like Master betrays him at the well when he goes to get the fish. And it's a heartbreaking moment when he looks to Frodo. Yeah. And he realizes that, that he no longer can trust this person.
Right.
And another thing, so not to go on and on, but with Frodo tells, just to kind of, because I think like Sam is the person who's, however we say, most good, most sinless, or closest to sinless. But Sam doesn't understand something substantial about Frodo. And that scene where they're in Gondor and they've been caught, and Frodo says to Sam, like, I can't do this. What we come to learn from these movies is he's right. He can't. Frodo actually cannot do this. And we'll see this in the final movie. This is not something he's capable of doing. And it's something that Sam doesn't understand even. Samwise, his name means half-wit. Like that's actually what that translates to it. Yeah.
Nice.
And initially he was a little stupider than he was, which I'm glad that Tolkien and also Jackson and Philippa following in Tolkien's example made him a lot more intelligent than he was originally intended. But Sam is the kind of most innocent character. But when you start reading it and going through some of these scenes, there's so much he misses, right? There's a little bit of guilt that
he's pretty simple. Yeah. He's not stupid. He's a little simple. Yeah.
He's a little simple, and he also doesn't understand the ring. And to be fair to him, no one understands the ring. Yeah,
True.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing you said earlier. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go for it.
Well, you talked about Gollum's fracture and the weight the ring bears upon anyone, and the way that it affects Gollum. Andy Serkis said that you said the ring strips him of himself, strips him of the eye of Gollum, right? And Andy Serkis said that he studied the way that like heroin addicts react during withdrawals for his portrayal of Gollum. And I think that's spot on. It's exactly what you're talking about. Like someone who suffers from that addiction loses all sense of themselves. And it's all about feeding the beast, right? Chasing the dragon. And I just thought that was a really interesting note that I read about his performance. And it tracks completely with what you're talking about. Because it's true. It's like, it's a true addiction, and all Sméagol is long gone. I mean? That's a really cool point. And I cut you off, so I'd like to hear what else you wanted to say.
No, that's fine. You cut me. I just keep talking and talking. So please cut me off, or I'll die of need of air. But and that's to speak of addiction. I think this is something that is also true in this movie and in this trilogy, is that what evil is absence. It's a lack of something, right? And that's what addiction is. Addiction is the evil of needing something you don't have and never being able to be something that is not defined by absence. And that's why Sauron is such an interesting villain. Not to spoil it, Ben, but you never see Sauron. Sorry, you always see is that eye up there, and that's not really him, right? That's like a. You
got to cut this off before you totally ruin the third movie.
I like now that I feel a companionship with Legolas, I want to shoot my ire elsewhere. But that's what Sauron is. Sauron is this absence. He's not there, and that's what the evil is in this movie. The evil isn't something that can create, and that kind of doesn't work because they make the Uruk-hai, right? Saruman makes the Uruk-hais, sort of. But what we see with the evil of addiction of the ring that you're talking about with Andy Serkis's breakdown, her analysis of his character, is also in that main villain. That at the center of evil is not a creative power, but only a power that can imitate, because it itself is nothing. It's a lack. And that goes into this whole Manichaeanism thing that we don't have to go into, because I don't want to bore your audience entirely. Just
I'm not sure we have time for that.
Yeah. But I think that's another interesting thing. And the ring is an interesting symbol of it, because the ring itself is kind of defined by absence, right? It's something that is missing. That's how
it needs to be filled to have its power.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's another interesting feature of this story.
Nice. Totally. Well, gosh, Tom, I'd let you keep going, but I think I gotta cut us off.
At some point.
But no, it's okay. I really do. I was really excited to know that you were coming on this, because again, it's one of my favorite movies, and I always do love your perspective on things. You always bring a unique,
for sure,
a unique set of experiences and knowledge to everything we talk about. So I really appreciate all of that. I appreciate you being here. If you want, give the people one more opportunity to find out how they can find you and your podcast and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And thank you for the warm compliments.
Of course.
You can find me on Talking Pictures Trivia. That's the podcast. TalkingPicturesTrivia.com is the website. I also have a sister podcast, Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side, in which we go into the movies in a little more depth that we cover. We do a weekly show. It comes out on Wednesdays. We did the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that's the Fellowship has just come out as of the time that we're recording right now. Two Towers and then Return are coming out.
Our podcasts have a very strange synergy in that way.
Yeah.
I feel like we're always doing similar stuff at the same time without planning it. That's cool.
It is. So if you want to hear more of my nonsense, jump over to Talking Pictures Trivia. And I want to thank you guys. I had a great time. I appreciate the warm compliments, and have me on as often as you like.
Awesome.
Just hit me up on Twitter.
Always a great guest.
Yeah.
Definitely. You. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Or I don't know when you're listening or watching this episode. For me, it's tonight, and I'm done for the evening. We are 3 Films in a Podcast signing off. You can find us at 3 Films Pod on all your socials. Check out our website for merch and Patreon support options. And keep your eye on your podcast feed for our discussion of The Fellowship of the Rings. We'll see you later.
Yep.
A buddy of mine saw Kylo Ren take his shirt off in the shower, and he said that Kylo Ren had an 8-pack. That Kylo Ren was shredded.
What? Your friend's a liar, man. Kylo Ren is a punk bitch. That guy looks like he weighs 30 pounds soaking wet underneath that little black dress.
Tim? Tim! Oh no, he's choking on food.
I see what's in your mind. And it is stupid!
Dude, Matt straight up sucks.